The lower decks of Station Obsidian reeked of desperation and processed air. Nyla stood on the auction platform, her violet skin gleaming under harsh fluorescent lights that made her feel exposed and hollow. The ceremonial wraps of her people. Once symbols of honor had been torn and retied to reveal more flesh than modesty allowed. Her silver hair cascaded down her back in waves, tangled and unwashed. She was 23 cycles old, and this was the 4th time she had been sold this year. The Velthian people were prized for their natural body heat, a biological adaptation from their cold homeworld. Slavers had discovered this trait made them valuable as living heaters. Luxury items for wealthy beings who enjoyed the comfort of a warm bed without the cost of climate systems. Nyla had heard the term so many times it had become part of her identity. Warmth bearer, bed servant. Property or amber eyes, large and reflective, scanned the crowd of potential buyers. Traders in expensive fabrics, crime lords with armed guards. Wealthy merchants seeking exotic additions to their households. Of them looked at her the same way one might examine livestock. She kept her chin raised despite the humiliation burning in her chest. If she was going to be sold again, she would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her broken. The auctioneer, squat Draxian, with gray skin and too many fingers, gestured broadly. Here we have a prime specimen. Young, healthy, naturally warm, perfect for cold climate stations or luxury vessels, trained, obedient, and certified disease-free. We'll start the bidding at 4,000 credits. Hands rose. Numbers climbed. Nyla stopped listening to the amounts. What difference did it make? She would wake tomorrow in another cage, another room, another place where her name did not matter. Then she noticed him. A human stood near the back of the auction hall, arms crossed, watching with an expression she could not quite read. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with brown skin weathered by years of space travel. His dark hair was cropped short, streaked with early gray at the temples. He wore a simple flight jacket, patched at the elbows, and cargo pants tucked into worn boots. Nothing about him suggested wealth or power. He looked like a working man, a hauler perhaps, someone who moved freight between stations and planets, but his eyes were different. They were not cold or hungry like the others. They were troubled. Captain Marcus Shaw had seen many things in his 15 years hauling cargo across the frontier. He had witnessed wars, famines, and the collapse of entire colonies. But nothing had prepared him for the casual cruelty of the slave markets that operated openly in the station's lower levels. He had come here following a lead on a shipment, but the moment he stepped into the auction hall, he knew he had made a mistake. The woman on the platform was breathtaking, not because of her body, though it was striking, but because of the defiance still burning in her eyes. Despite everything, she had not surrendered. Marcus felt something twist in his chest, a memory of his younger sister who had been taken by raiders when he was just a boy. He had never found her. He had spent years searching before finally accepting she was gone. But this woman was not gone. She was right here. The bidding reached 8,000 credits. Marcus glanced at his credit stick. He had 9,000 saved for ship repairs. If he spent it here, the Wanderer would be flying on patched systems for another year. But if he walked away, he knew he would see those amber eyes every time he closed his own.
9,000, Marcus called out, his voice steady. The room turned to look at him. The auctioneer grinned, smelling fresh profit. 9,000 from the human in the back.
Do I hear 10? Silence. The other bidders glanced at Marcus, then at each other. A human buying a warmth bearer was unusual. Humans generated their own body heat and had no practical use for Velthian servants. It made them suspicious. Going once? Going twice. Sold to the human for 9,000 credits. Nyla felt her stomach drop. A human. She knew little about them, except that they were newcomers to the Galactic community, aggressive and unpredictable. What would a human want with her? Fear coiled in her belly as she was led off the platform, her wrists still bound with ceremonial cords. Marcus approached the payment station and transferred the credits. The transaction was cold and efficient. A datapad was thrust into his hands with ownership documentation. He stared at the screen, disgusted by the words. Property. Chattel. Asset. When Nyla was brought to him, she kept her gaze lowered. She had learned that looking directly at new owners often provoked anger. Marcus noticed the bruises on her arms, the way she flinched when the handler released her. "Can you walk?" Marcus asked quietly. Nyla looked up, startled by the question. No one had asked her that before. She nodded slowly. "Good. Follow me." He turned and walked toward the exit. Nyla hesitated, then followed, her bare feet silent on the cold metal floor. The ceremonial cords still bound her wrists. She expected him to lead her to some private quarters, to claim what he had purchased. Instead, he led her to a docking bay. The Wanderer was not impressive. It was a mid-sized freight hauler, battered and scarred from years of use. Paint flaked from the hull. Repair patches covered old meteor strikes. But the engines hummed steadily, and the cargo bay was clean. Marcus keyed open the hatch and gestured inside. "Get in." Nyla climbed the ramp, her heart pounding. The interior was functional. Cargo netting hung from the walls. Crates were secured with magnetic locks. There was a small living area with a galley, a navigation console, and 2 sleeping bunks built into the walls. Marcus closed the hatch behind them and locked it. Nyla tensed, preparing herself. This was when it would begin. Instead, Marcus pulled a small blade from his belt. Nyla's breath caught, but he simply reached for her wrists and cut the ceremonial cords. They fell to the floor in a heap. "Those don't belong on anyone," Marcus said. Nyla stared at her freed hands, unable to process what had just happened. She looked up at Marcus, confusion and suspicion warring in her expression. "Why did you buy me?" she whispered. Marcus met her gaze steadily, because nobody should be sold. Nyla did not believe him. Trust was a luxury she could not afford. She stood in the center of the Wanderer's small living area, rubbing her wrists where the cords had left marks. Her body was tense, ready to run or fight, though both options seemed futile inside a locked ship. Marcus moved to the galley and pulled out a ration pack. He tore it open and set it on the table. "You should eat." Nyla did not move. She watched him carefully, analyzing every gesture. Humans were still a mystery to most of the galaxy. Had arrived only 2 generations ago, expanding rapidly from their small corner of space. Some said they were warriors. Others claimed they were traders. Nyla had heard whispers that humans were unpredictable, driven by emotions rather than logic. "I'm not hungry," she lied. Her stomach was hollow. She had not eaten since yesterday. Marcus sighed and sat down at the table. "Look, I know you don't trust me. I wouldn't either. But we're going to be traveling together for a while, and I'd rather you not collapse from hunger." "Traveling where?" Nyla asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "Away from here. I have a delivery run to Haven's Edge, a frontier colony about 3 days from here. After that, we'll figure out what comes next." "What comes next?" Nyla repeated slowly. "You mean when you decide what to do with your property?" Marcus flinched at the word. "You're not my property. I bought you out of that market, but I'm not keeping you. Once we reach Haven's Edge, you're free to go wherever you want." Nyla laughed bitterly. "Free? I have no credits. No identification that isn't stamped with slave codes. No skills except warming beds. Where exactly am I supposed to go?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering her words. She was right. Freedom without resources was just another form of cage. Then we'll figure it out together. But first, you need to eat and rest. You look like you haven't slept properly in weeks." Nyla's defenses wavered. She was exhausted. The fear and adrenaline that had sustained her through the auction were fading, leaving only bone-deep weariness. Slowly, she approached the table and picked up the ration pack. It was bland, military-grade nutrition, but it was food. She ate mechanically, forcing herself to chew and swallow. Marcus stood and moved to a storage locker. He pulled out a simple jumpsuit, clean and practical. "This should fit you better than those wraps. The refresher is through that door. Take your time." Nyla took the jumpsuit, still wary, but Marcus made no move toward her. He simply returned to the navigation console and began checking system diagnostics. After a long moment, Nyla walked to the refresher and closed the door behind her. The water was hot. She stood under the spray for longer than necessary, letting it wash away layers of grime and shame. When she finally emerged, dressed in the jumpsuit, She felt almost human, almost herself. Marcus had prepared tea, a simple herbal blend that smelled of earth and honey. He offered her a cup. "It's from my home world. Nothing fancy, but it helps." Nyla accepted it, wrapping her hands around the warmth. They sat in silence for a while, the hum of the ship's engines filling the space between them. "Why did you really buy me?" Nyla asked finally. Marcus stared into his own cup. "I had a sister once. She was taken by raiders when I was 16. I searched for years, but I never found her. I don't know if she's alive or dead. But when I saw you on that platform, I thought about her. I thought about what I would want someone to do if they found her." Nyla felt something crack inside her chest. She had expected lust, or ownership, or cruelty. She had not expected grief. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "So am I," Marcus replied. The ship lurched slightly as it detached from the station and began its journey. Nyla looked out the viewport at the stars streaming past. For the first time in years, she felt the faintest flicker of hope. Over the next 2 days, an uneasy companionship formed between them. Kuz taught her how to navigate the ship's basic systems. Nyla learned to read star charts and monitor fuel levels. She discovered that humans valued conversation, a trait many species found inefficient. Marcus talked about his travels, the colonies he had visited, the strange and beautiful things he had seen. Nyla, in turn, began to share fragments of her own story. She spoke of her homeworld, a frozen planet of ice forests and crystal mountains. She described her family, taken one by slavers, until she was the last. She explained the cultural significance of the ceremonial wraps, now ruined and discarded. On the third night, as they drifted through the quiet dark between stars, Marcus found Nyla standing at the viewport. She was staring at a distant nebula, its colors swirling like paint in water. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Marcus said quietly. Nyla nodded. "I forgot the universe could be beautiful." Marcus stood beside her, close but not touching. "You deserve to see it freely." Nyla turned to look at him. In the soft glow of the console lights, his face was open and honest. She realized with a jolt of surprise that she trusted him. Somewhere in the past 3 days, her fear had transformed into something else. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me." Marcus smiled, a gentle expression that reached his eyes. "You were always worth seeing." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Nyla felt her heart beat faster. She had been touched by many hands, but never with kindness, never with choice. She reached out slowly and took his hand. Marcus's fingers closed around hers, warm and steady. "Is this okay?" she whispered. "Only if you want it to be," Marcus replied. Nyla stepped closer, her body a breath away from his. "I do." When their lips met, it was tentative and careful, a question and an answer all at once. Nyla felt warmth spread through her, not the biological heat she had been valued for, but something deeper and more profound. She felt seen. She felt chosen. They pulled apart slowly, foreheads resting together. "We should take this slow," Marcus murmured. "I know," Nyla agreed, but her hand remained in his. The ship hummed around them, carrying them toward Haven's Edge and whatever future awaited there. Haven's Edge was a rough frontier colony, carved into the side of a mountain on a world with twin suns. The settlement was small, maybe 2,000 people, mostly miners and traders. The buildings were prefabricated domes connected by covered walkways. It was not beautiful, but it was honest. Marcus landed the Wanderer in the public docking field and completed his delivery, offloading mining equipment to a grateful foreman. The payment was transferred immediately, giving Marcus enough credits to refuel and restock supplies. NYLA stood at the edge of the docking field, staring at the colony with uncertainty. "What now?" Marcus shouldered his pack. "Now we figure out what you want." They walked through the colony together. Haven's Edge had a rough charm. The people here were hardworking and pragmatic. No one stared at Nyla or asked invasive questions. On the frontier, everyone had a past they preferred not to discuss. Marcus rented a small hab unit, 2 rooms connected by a shared common area. It was simple, but clean. Nyla explored it carefully, running her fingers along the walls as if testing its reality. "This is for me?" she asked, For us, for now, Marcus clarified, until you decide what you want to do. Nyla sat on the edge of the sleeping platform, overwhelmed. I don't know what I want. I've never been allowed to want anything. Marcus knelt in front of her so they were at eye level. Then take your time. There's no rush. Over the following weeks, Nyla began to discover herself. Marcus introduced her to the colony administrator, a stern woman named Commander Petra, who asked no questions and offered Nyla temporary work in the colony's greenhouse. Nyla found she had a talent for growing things. The plants responded to her touch, thriving under her care. In the evenings, Marcus taught her to read Galactic Standard more fluently. They cooked meals together, simple dishes that Marcus remembered from home. Nyla laughed for the first time in years when Marcus accidentally burned the rice so badly it stuck to the pot in a blackened mass. I'm a better pilot than cook, Marcus admitted sheepishly. Clearly Nyla teased. Their relationship deepened slowly, built on moments of shared laughter and quiet understanding. Marcus never pushed. He let Nyla set the pace. Some nights she slept in her own room. Other nights she sought his company, curling against him as they watched the stars through the HAB unit's viewport. One evening, after a particularly long day in the greenhouse, Nyla returned to find Marcus on the roof of their HAB unit. He had spread a blanket and set out food and drink. What's this? Nyla asked, climbing up to join him. The locals told me there's a meteor shower tonight. I thought you might want to watch it. Nyla settled beside him, accepting a cup of wine. The twin suns had set, leaving the sky dark and vast. Above them, the meteor shower began, streaks of light cutting across the heavens in brilliant arcs. It's incredible, Nyla breathed. Marcus watched her face, illuminated by starlight. You're incredible. Nyla turned to him, her expression soft. You say things like that so easily, because they're true. Nyla set down her cup and moved closer, straddling his lap. Marcus's hands came to rest on her hips, his touch gentle. Are you sure? He asked. I've never been more sure of anything, Nyla replied. Their kiss was deeper this time. It's filled with weeks of growing desire and trust. Nyla's hands slid under Marcus's shirt, feeling the warmth of his skin. Marcus's fingers traced the curve of her spine, reverent and careful. They made love under the meteor shower, their bodies moving together in a rhythm that felt both new and ancient. Nyla felt herself come alive in ways she had never experienced. This was not about servitude or obligation. This was about connection, about two people choosing each other freely. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the blanket, Nyla's head resting on Marcus's chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear. I love you, Nyla, whispered. Marcus kissed the top of her head. I love you too. For a moment, everything felt perfect. But perfection on the frontier never lasted long. The next morning, Marcus received a message on his comm unit. His face went pale as he read it. What's wrong? Nyla asked. There's a bounty hunter on the station. He's asking about a Velthian woman matching your description. Blood ran cold. Croven who? My former master. He's a Zarkonian crime lord. He doesn't let his property go easily. Marcus's jaw tightened. You're not property, and he's not taking you. But even as he spoke, they both knew the danger was real. Croven the Merciless was not a man who accepted loss. He was coming, and he would bring violence with him. The bounty hunter arrived at Haven's Edge 3 days later. His name was Vex, a Rachnaran mercenary with a reputation for always completing his contracts. He was 7 feet tall, covered in chitinous armor, and carried enough weapons to outfit a small militia. Commander Petra called Marcus to her office. This hunter is asking questions about your companion. I told him nothing, but he's not leaving until he gets answers. Marcus nodded grimly. I appreciate the warning. Marcus, this colony can't afford trouble with someone like Croven. If this escalates, I'll have to ask you to leave. Understood. Marcus returned to the HAB unit where Nyla was packing supplies with shaking hands. We need to go, she said urgently. If we leave now, maybe he won't follow. He'll follow, Marcus said quietly. Men like Croven don't stop. Running just delays the inevitable. Then what do we do? Marcus looked at her, his expression resolute. We stand. Nyla felt fear and something else, something fierce rise in her chest. I'm tired of running. Then we fight together. They spent the day preparing. Marcus reached out to a few contacts, old military friends who owed him favors. 3 showed up. A human sniper named Jackson, a Tellurian engineer called Rin, and a former soldier named Yara. They were not an army, but they were loyal. Kroven arrived the following evening with 6 armed enforcers. He was a massive Zarkonian, his green skin covered in ceremonial scars. His eyes were cold and calculating. He found Marcus and Nyla in the colony's central plaza. The colonists had cleared out, sensing violence. Human, Kroven's voice rumbled like grinding stone. You have stolen my property. Return her, and I will let you live. Marcus stepped forward, placing himself between Kroven and Nyla. She's not property. She's free, Kroven laughed, a sound without humor. Freedom is an illusion for the weak. She was bred to serve. That is her purpose. Nyla stepped out from behind Marcus. Her voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her. My purpose is mine, to decide. I am not yours. I never was. Kroven's expression darkened. Then you will be punished for your defiance. And this human will die for his interference. I don't think so. Commander Petra's voice cut through the tension. She stood at the edge of the plaza with a dozen armed colonists. This colony doesn't tolerate slavers. You have one chance to leave peacefully. Kroven assessed the situation. His enforcers shifted nervously. They had expected an easy retrieval, not organized resistance. You would risk war for one slave, Kroven demanded. Risking nothing, Petra replied. We're defending our people, and she's one of ours now. The standoff held for a long moment. Then Kroven made his move, drawing a weapon. Chaos erupted. Marcus tackled Nyla to the ground as energy blasts cut through the air. Jackson's rifle sang from a rooftop, taking down 2 enforcers. Rin activated defensive shields. Yara moved like liquid shadow, her blade finding targets with lethal precision. Kroven charged toward Marcus and Nyla. Marcus rolled to his feet, drawing his own weapon, but Kroven was faster. His massive fist caught Marcus in the chest, sending him flying backward. Nyla screamed. Something inside her broke open, years of suppressed rage and pain erupting all at once. She grabbed a piece of metal debris and swung it with all her strength. It connected with Kroven's head. He staggered, surprised. You dare? He roared. I dare, Nyla spat. I'm done being afraid of you. She swung again. Kroven blocked it, but Marcus was back on his feet. Together, they fought. Marcus's military training and Nyla's desperate fury combined into something formidable. The battle was brutal and short. The colonists' superior numbers overwhelmed Kroven's enforcers. Vex the bounty hunter, seeing the tide turn, simply walked away. His contract was not worth his life. Kroven, bleeding and defeated, snarled at Nyla. This changes nothing. Others will come. Marcus pressed his weapon to Kroven's head. Then let them know what happens when they try. Commander Petra stepped forward. Kroven, of the Zarkonian Syndicate, you are under arrest for trafficking, assault, and attempted murder. You'll be transferred to Federation custody. As Kroven was dragged away, Nyla collapsed to her knees, adrenaline fading. Marcus knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms. It's over, he whispered. Nyla buried her face in his shoulder and wept, tears of relief and release. The weeks following the battle brought profound change. Kroven was prosecuted and sentenced to life imprisonment. The news of a frontier colony standing against a slaver sent ripples through the sector. Other colonies took notice. Other victims found courage. Nyla spent her days working in the greenhouse, but her evenings were devoted to something new. She had begun documenting her story, recording testimony about the slave markets and the systems that enabled them. Commander Petra connected her with a Federation investigator, who was building a case against the trafficking networks. Marcus watched her transformation with quiet pride. The frightened woman from the auction platform was gone, placed by someone fierce and purposeful. One evening, As they sat together watching the twin suns set, Nyla took Marcus's hand. I've been thinking about what comes next, and I want to help others like me. There are thousands still trapped in those markets. I want to be part of ending it, Marcus smiled. Then that's what we'll do. Did you think I'd let you do this alone? Besides, the Wanderer could use a co-pilot. Nyla leaned against him, feeling complete for the first time in her life. Partners then, partners, Marcus agreed. In everything, they formalized their bond in a simple ceremony attended by the colonists who had become their family. Petra officiated, declaring them joined in purpose and in heart. It was not a traditional wedding by any culture's standards, but it was perfect. Their mission began small. Marcus and Nyla used the Wanderer to transport freed slaves to safe colonies. They worked with underground networks, providing logistics and protection. Word spread. Others joined their cause. Jackson, Rin, and Yara became the core of what they called the Freedom Road, a loose organization. Dedicated to disrupting trafficking operations, NYLA discovered she had a gift for strategy and negotiation. Her first-hand knowledge of how the markets operated made her invaluable. Marcus provided the military precision and piloting skills that kept them alive. They liberated 17 people in their first year, 34 in their second. The numbers grew as their reputation spread. Not every mission succeeded. They lost people. They made mistakes, but they never stopped. 5 years after that day on Station Obsidian, Marcus and Nyla stood on the bridge of a larger ship, the Wanderer II. Their crew had expanded to 20 dedicated individuals, each with their own story of survival and resistance. Nyla studied a star map, planning their next operation. Marcus stood behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been at that auction? He asked. NYLA covered his hands with hers. Sometimes, but I think we would have found each other eventually. Some connections are inevitable. That's poetic. I learned from the best. They kissed, a familiar comfort that still sparked with passion. Ready for the next one? Marcus asked. NYLA nodded, her amber eyes bright with determination. Always. The Wanderer II's engines hummed to life, and they jumped to hyperspace. Behind them, they left freed souls and disrupted chains. Ahead lay more battles, more rescues, more chances to prove that freedom was not a privilege but a right. And together, they would fight for it, one person at a time.